Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is just 6 months away, guys. As we wait for the release, we often do have questions on our minds. Will it top the other Borderlands titles? Is there going to be positive changes? Are previous mechanics going to make their way back? One thing is certain, we know that Borderlands 3's engine and mechanics were used to develop Wonderlands. While Borderlands 3 did do a lot of good, it also introduced a lot of changes that many players did not agree with. Right off the bat, this video was not made to attack Borderlands 3, but instead highlight certain aspects of the game that could be improved upon. I have reached out to the community to see what you guys would like to see added, changed, and removed jumping from Borderlands 3 to Tina's Wonderlands. You guys gave great responses and I appreciate you for voicing your opinions. Today we are going to cover those in hopes that Gearbox and 2K are listening, and we'll use them to shape Tina Wonderlands into the best game it can be. This is a community response.
I felt like Troy kind of just got thrown out there. I felt like he could have done more. It's just Troy should have fully betrayed her. At least that's how it felt like it was going to happen. Like, that's where I felt like that story was going.
Story is an important piece of the Borderlands franchise. Not only does it help us gradually connect with the characters, it also gives us a reason to keep pushing forward. For many of us, Borderlands 3 fell short of that. While there is story to be told, it was delivered in the wrong way. One point that you guys did bring up a lot is that your character doesn't really impact the main story. For example, when a cutscene is playing, your character is nowhere to be seen. It's almost as if you disappear from existence. After the cutscene ends, you pop right back to where you left off. This leads to a disconnect from the story and players wonder why they couldn't do anything. It would be a huge improvement if your character did appear in cutscenes. Even if the player had a failed attempt at stopping the bad guy from carrying out their plan, that would still be better than them not existing at all. Next, we want to bring up the villains. The Calypso twins fell short of being the villains we all hoped for. Our mission was to stop them from taking over the world. In the end, we wanted to stop them because, well, they were annoying.
Yeah, 'cause you eat butts. Skag butts.
Now, it isn't entirely a bad thing to have a little annoyance, but Borderlands 3 puts it over the top. There are many different characteristics that make a good villain. Humor, hatred, intelligence, I could go on and on. When the main trait of a villain is to annoy the player, they tend not to impact as a worthy villain in the long run. There needs to be meaningful dialogue between the player and the villains to tie the story together. The progression from good versus evil wasn't entirely met, which brings us to our next point.
I would like the game to have progression in such a way so as to have replayability through building characters.
As you push through the main story, the pacing isn't quite as many desire. There are a lot of moments where the player finds himself standing around waiting for dialogue to pass or events to trigger. While that is not a bad thing for players to piece together the story on their first few playthroughs, it does ultimately affect the replayability of the game. At some point, players want to jump into the gameplay since they already know how the story unfolds. Now, there are a couple ways this can be improved. One of the most popular options is adding an option for dialogue skip. A smooth way this could be implemented is by interacting with the NPC again. By interacting with them a second time, it would skip their dialogue and allow the next objective to pop up right away. Another option is to have the objectives pop up right away as the dialogue is playing, so that means that the player already has the knowledge of what to do next. They could just head there without waiting for the dialogue to end. By adding one of these options, it would give players a much smoother experience when playing through the main story again. One thing that would also help the pacing is having the correct form of balancing, which brings us to our next discussion.
I don't think balance has ever been done too incredibly in the Borderlands games. For whatever reason, it seemed like at the start of the game, they forgot that endgame was a thing. And then once they realized they needed to make endgame and they balanced everything around it, they forgot that the early game was a thing. I remember doing a one life Malawan Mose and getting a Hell Shock at the the earliest level you could get it, and that was the only gun I needed for the entire playthrough on a one life.
Balance is an important part of any game out there. Without it, difficulty is thrown all over the place and challenges are a hit or miss. Borderlands 3 skill trees, items, and difficulty do not follow a stair-step balance. Tier 1 skill tree skills outperform later skills in the skill tree, gear balancing is a mess, and difficulty spikes and declines throughout the content. We could make a whole video on just this topic alone, but we will keep it simple for this video. We don't think that balance will ever truly be 100% met, but we do hope it is better going into Tina's Wonderlands. The main takeaway is that skill tree skills should reflect what their card says, and item buffs / nerfs should be accounted for all difficulties of the game. Speaking of difficulty, let's proceed on here.
Endgame is my entire thing. Just variety in endgame, you know? Some big bosses, some dungeon crawler aspects, and then something to focus on delivering the loot to the player. I think delivering the loot to the player is the most important one.
Endgame content is something we all want heading into Tina's Wonderlands. We did get some in Borderlands 3, but it wasn't enough to feed our hunger. The number one response to the endgame was to have more traditional raid bosses, and some more takedowns. Borderlands 2 offered us so many raid bosses and kept us busy for our endgame grinds. While some of the raid bosses in Borderlands 2 were questionable, the endgame challenge was still there. Borderlands 3 offered Maliwan Takedown, which was a fan favorite after a little rebalancing. However, Guardian Takedown didn't quite click for a lot of us. The major complaints is that it was too long, it had too much platforming, a lack of checkpoints, boring puzzles, and dragged on immunity phases. We do respect that they wanted to try something different for the Guardian Takedown, but a majority did not find it fun. We hope that they can use this knowledge to produce awesome endgame content for Tina's Wonderlands, so we can hunt down those legendaries. Which brings us to our next point.
I would like legendaries to drop less often, or have a rarity higher, like pearlescence or whatever, to drop less often so that they felt more rewarding, and those weapons will be, you know, better. Time spent should reflect, I think, either the rarity or the quality of the weapon.
Now, not less legendary variety, but less legendary world drop rates. Many have mentioned that legendaries have lost their special feeling in Borderlands 3, and that is mainly because of how often they drop. In Borderlands 2, excitement sets in when a legendary drops since it is a rare moment. In Borderlands 3, excitement doesn't set in until you look through a pile of legendaries and find what you're looking for. A good example is candy. A little bit of candy is nice, but too much of it will make you sick. This is the basic concept of quality versus quantity. If a legendary is rare, it will have more of an impact on the player when they find it. If it is more common, then it will have less of an impact. This should also be reflected upon difficult challenges. If a challenge is time-consuming and or difficult to overcome, then it should be more generous. This is something great that Borderlands 3 nails when taking down a raid boss. You are rewarded for it. This is definitely a step in the right direction. Please allow Tina Wonderlands to redeem what legendaries once were, maybe even take it a step beyond that, which is a perfect opportunity to bring up the next point.
I absolutely loved seeing like a Pearl or a Seraph dropping in Borderlands 2. It's that excitement, it's that joy that that feeling that you get in your stomach when it drops. You're just like, oh my god. And I think that having them do something extremely special will put them over the edge. Give us the rarest of the rare. I want to farm and farm and farm and farm and farm and still not get one, and then finally get one, and then of course that just makes me all that more excited to play even more.
The rarest of the rare. Those who grind out endgame have wanted something to hunt for outside of legendary loot. Now, we're not saying that they should specifically bring back pearlescent rarity, but something that is more rare than legendaries. This is one thing that Borderlands 1 and 2 got right. Sure, pearlescents were not the strongest, but they were very satisfying to hunt for. Tina Wonderlands could remedy this and make them truly shine. Another community suggestion was to bring back hybrids. For those not familiar, hybrids were a weapon type back in Borderlands 1. Not only were they extremely hard to find, but they also consisted of 2 weapon effects on a single weapon. This is something that collectors would love to hunt for in Tina's Wonderlands and Unleash Mayhem. Which brings us back to the endgame talk.
I think Mayhem 11 is great. I think the opportunity to play at an upscaled difficulty without additional modifiers and just random stuff going on is great. I really enjoy that. I see I'm playing at a more difficult level, but I'm getting similar to, if not the exact same drops.
Mayhem mode was not favored by many. It was quickly shot down by players as an unfun way to experience endgame difficulty. It ultimately ended up in players losing damage if they don't adapt to the wacky modifiers, and had them dancing around the battlefield to avoid laser traps. However, some of the modifiers were fun. Running around at lightning speed and giving enemies big heads was something some of us enjoyed. Once Mayhem 11 dropped, most players found themselves jumping to that difficulty just to escape the modifiers. If modifiers do make their way back into Wonderlands, please make them optional. Speaking of optional, let's jump into our final discussion.
I think that a rework and change would be a better way to go about it. A system that doesn't heavily rely around parts or like anoints, but make it so that it's like half parts, half anoints to make them both worthwhile. I don't think we have that generally in Borderlands 3, but having that in Wonderlands as a whole new system, that would be nice.
We screamed at this one during the life cycle of Borderlands 3. In fact, it was the most common community request. Anoints need looked at. We saw in the Wonderlands trailer that loot was spawning with the anointed beams, so we know there is a high chance it could return in some form. Now, no developer likes throwing away hard work, and that's completely understandable. However, a majority of responses was to not bring back anoints, or enchants, or whatever they're going to be called in Wonderlands. The 100 to 300% damage bonus given in Borderlands 3 was excessive. Not only that, anoints encouraged the same playstyle on all the characters. Action skill end, deliver damage. This made anoints more important than the item itself. While most of us lean towards the idea of them not returning, there are 3 possible outcomes that would please the community. 1. Give anoints a very small damage bonus that doesn't deliver an insane power spike. 2. Make anoints not damage based. Instead, they could give us a small speed bonus, health regeneration, or a little reload speed. Or 3. Don't bring anoints back at all. Anoints were a creative idea, but they definitely took a wrong turn in Borderlands 3. Again, this is not an attack on the Borderlands series. We are all very passionate about the Borderlands franchise, and we all want Tina's Wonderlands to be the game it was meant to be. We just don't want to experience the cycle of being let down by the game not getting the proper love it deserves again. Let's be honest, Borderlands 3 had a rough launch. It slowly got better over time, but the damage was done. We don't want the same fate for Wonderlands. We want it to be a game we can play for years and years to come. We believe it can achieve that. Thank you for watching.